Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us for our presentation of an update on the MWF collaborative efforts. Now, how many of you know what MWF stands for?
It's actually not bad.
That's not bad, actually. So I won't spend a lot of time giving you a background. It stands for Mobile Web Framework. This was a term that I personally first heard 2 years ago at UCCSC 2010 by presentation from UCLA. My name is Mojgan Amini. I'm from UC San Diego. Today we have 3 other presenters from various UCs, Rich Trott from UC San Francisco, Eric Bollens from UCLA, and Tom Tsai from UC Berkeley. And we all have our stories to put together pieces of the puzzle for MWF and where it is 2 years later. From UC San Diego's perspective, we basically wanted to let you know why we went with MWF and a little bit of background and history and where we are 2 years later. So in 2010, when we were just happened to be at UCCSC and stumbled upon a presentation of MWF, we were at the same time on our campus grappling with the problem of bringing an campus-wide strategic plan in place for mobile across all the entities of UC San Diego. And really what we needed was one mobile strategy, not many across the campus. We wanted to be able to support multiple devices because at that time we were very proud to have an iPhone application from UC San Diego. We were one of the first to get that out there. And we were very proud of that, but the time had passed and we needed to catch up with other devices. So it was very important to support multiple devices. Also, we had lots of technologies across the campus. We wanted to be based on something standard, easy for developers to grasp and ramp up with. We wanted one unified mobile offering for the entire campus, not many different ones. And we knew that the mobile realm was a very fast-moving one, and we played it safe. We said, okay, if we find a solution for the next 1 to 2 years, we're good with that. We're going to expect that we might have to ditch it and go with the next technology that comes forward. So we were kind of basing it on that. And really, we wanted, again, to reiterate that this was fast-moving. We want to be able to take this technology now, but be open to moving on to a new technology in the future. So putting all of that together, all of those requirements, really we had no choice but to go with Mobile Web Framework. We did an extensive comparative analysis of everything that was out there and got all the IT groups involved across UC San Diego. MWF became the clear winner. We quickly implemented that on our campus as a central solution for all the entire campus entities, but we took it a step beyond that. It's one thing to put a technology out there for the campus to use, all the entities to use, but it's another to make it easier to use, to put the guidelines and documentation, templates, examples in place to make it an easy solution to adopt. So what we did was we hosted the MWF centrally. We also put our SLA and governance plans in place and open and posted out clearly for everyone to see. We extended the MWF framework, which allows developers across the campus and content owners to provide a mobile experience from a website. We extended that. We wrapped it in our campus branding. We put forms and buttons and widgets in place that kind of extended what the toolkit was. We also created what we call the kitchen sink application, which is every widget or everything that this framework can do in one web application. And I'll show you a screenshot of that. In addition to that, our group provided services such as user experience design, because designing for mobile applications is very different than designing for web applications. We also provided QA services. We had experience, and we had many different devices that we can test websites on to make sure that they work properly. So anyway, we took an offering that was good to begin with, and we made it, in our eyes, even better and even easier to adopt. I put this URL on the screen, but this is our user experience and technologies website, and particularly the link to the mobile tools area where you could see the kitchen sink, etc. This is a screenshot of what it looks like. Oh, there it goes. So this is actually 2 screenshots side by side. And this is what we call, this is a piece of our kitchen sink application. It has buttons and links and all the styles. So if the campus branding changes, we change our CSS styles behind the scenes. The colors, et cetera, change appropriately. So once we had that in place, we said that this is a gap that probably other UCs or other users of MWF would want to fill as well. So we actually ended up contributing it back to the core MWF project. And so the forms that you see on the screen and the messages and et cetera, all those kind of widgets that you see that make the websites more interactive, those were contributed back to the MWF project. And just to let you know, when we heard about it and when all of these other UCs have had the chance to jump in and work with the MWF, it has grown substantially. It has changed substantially. Mobile is a very fast-moving realm, so it has to adopt and maintain its kind of leading-edge technologies to keep up. So what it takes is contributions like this. So when we contributed these parts of technologies, other UCs will contribute other things, and even outside the UCs, there's other universities contributing. So you'll hear a little bit about how that's growing. The other transition that we made on our campus, and you may have heard some of the presentations today already, or earlier in the morning and out there just a little while ago, was that we needed to not just support our applications, but the content. We had many, many websites we were supporting as well. We wanted to keep the content the same, but have it be presented appropriately on many different devices. So one set of content, many devices. We wanted the consistent campus branding for the websites and for the applications. Our team, our university had worked really hard to kind of put that hand in hand where it just seems seamless. You're going from one site to another site to an application back to a website, and it all looked very seamless. So we really wanted to leverage all of that work that has been done so that the application or the site looks the same on the smart phone, the tablet, and the desktop device. We really ventured into the realm of responsive web design, and we kind of distinguished. We were in this dilemma. Which one do we use? Do we use MWF, or do we use responsive web design? And as you can see here, for our main ucsd.edu website on my right, it's the responsive design that we went with. So folks go on it. If you're on a laptop, it looks a certain way. If you're on a tablet, it gives you the same information, but it looks very pleasing to that device's real estate. If you're on a smaller phone, it looks like that, but you get the same experience. For the tools, however, we stayed with MWF. So tools are more like a function that you want to do. You want to go quickly in there, find a place on the map and get out, or look up somebody's name in the directory and come out, or you want to know using your geolocation how to get from one place to another. So it's really leveraging what MWF has to offer. So we were, and again, the same with applications. We have a directory application. We have one written with a mobile web framework, and we have one written using the responsive web design technology. And they both give you the same information. They use 2 different technologies. And now we were at a point where we've done all this great work, but we need to keep one code set. And we became kind of in situations where we had to pick and choose which one made sense in one realm versus the other realm. And so, for example, with a directory, it made total sense to go with the responsive directory. One set of code is very straightforward, simple information to display. But the maps, no, we stayed with MWF because it's much more complicated. You want to use the device's functionality. You want it to be able to sense and give you directions, etc. So with that, we were at a point where we had to make a decision. Where do we break off? What do we do? And we thought that it would be a really beneficial process, and MWF, the core, had been thinking this as well, is to take these challenges that come with responsive web design, and a couple of them that I've listed on the screen were how do you handle large image files, because you don't want to take a big image and download all of that and use the bandwidth and scale it down on a small device. You don't want to do that. You want to be able to detect what this device is, what it can handle, maybe on the server size, compress it down, and serve the right size file. Same with large tabular data. We were seeing that financial reports or certain things like that just didn't make sense on a small mobile device. How do you display that properly? And so that's where the discussion came into play. Can we enhance mobile web firmware or transition it or keep up with the technology so that it can be used to support these challenges with responsive web design? And so I will hand the presentation over to our next speaker, which will continue on this topic, and you'll see how we solve these challenges one by one. Rich?
Thanks, Mojgan. So let's see here. Okay, so in 2010, we launched UCSF Mobile, and it was kind of a lark. We did it because nobody else was doing mobile on campus, and there was a void. We chose to fill it. It seemed like something we could do. And it turned out to be a lot more successful than we had anticipated. And perhaps we had bitten off more than we could chew. So we decided to embrace that and get a little more ambitious. And we looked around for existing tools that we could leverage to make our sort of bare bones mobile website a little more snazzy. And so our site looks much better after we joined the MWF project, the Mobile Web Framework. We got a lot of navigation goodies and so on and so forth. And we also were able to contribute stuff back to help others, continuing on the theme that Mojgan explained about sending the satisfaction of sending stuff back to the project and having other people use it. So we contributed tests, we contributed features like a customizable home screen and some other things, a whole bunch of bug fixes and so on and so forth. We were very active in the project, and it was a lot of fun. So much fun that I'm talking really, really fast about it. So our particular need was for performance. And we had a need for performance in a way that perhaps other campuses didn't. Although UCSD did have this need, I think, because our native applications basically just wrapped our website. And you can't really have a native application. You can't have a website experience where you go and you click on something and then you have to wait 4.5 seconds before you start seeing any content appear. It has to happen pretty much right away. So we had to address this issue. So we targeted performance, and we contributed code for an app cache handler, which allows the HTML5 app cache allows you to have your site run offline, basically, when you're not on the network. And there were things about the way MWF was implemented that made it not play nicely with app cache, so we solved that problem with the app cache handler. We also created a library called Lightning Touch, which I encourage you to check out. It gets rid of the 200 to 300 millisecond delay that happens on websites on touch devices like an iPhone. Basically, your browser is trying to make sure that you're not clicking and dragging or double clicking and that sort of thing, and so there's a delay. It kind of makes websites feel a little sticky as opposed to native applications. So Lightning Touch solves that problem. But it wasn't enough. We wanted to speed up everything we possibly could. So, incidentally, all those other things I was just describing don't just help the native application. They all apply to the website as well. And I think that that's really fantastic because I don't think people who are browsing the website should be treated like second-class citizens. They should get the same awesome experience that the native people get. So, we took some measurements and did a lot of benchmarking. And the biggest hit on initial page load came from something called the device telemetry stack, which was a feature of MWF that allowed the server to have a lot of information about the device. So, for example, the width or height of the screen. That's something that's really easy to tell in JavaScript, but if you're on the server side running PHP or Java or whatever, there's no easy way to know. So the device telemetry stack wrote that information to a cookie and provided an API interface to get that information. So that that's really useful. For example, for an image compressor, you want to know, oh, I want to compress the image to the width of the device, something like that. Anyway, the support for distributed architecture, where 4 or 5 departments around campus have their mobile content on their servers, but there's a central campus mobile web framework server where all the JavaScript and CSS are served from. That architecture, which is crucial to MWF, it was one of its differentiating characteristics. Unfortunately, it meant that for a device telemetry stack to work in an environment like that, there had to be a couple of redirects on the initial page load so that the cookie could be set properly without causing the browser to go in an infinite redirect loop, which last time I checked was considered bad user experience. So redirects really hurt your performance, perhaps not to the level of disaster as that is indicated by this image, but I really couldn't, it's my favorite image that I've ever seen in my entire life, so I had to put it in presentation. Okay, so because DTS was so deeply embedded in the mobile web framework, the question was, were we biting off more than we could chew? Could we really remove this thing? And there was, there's a little bit of discussion about it, but eventually we just had to sort of dive in and go ahead and try to do it. And the answer was yes, we could remove it. It turned out that, the DTS enabled a very, very large number of features, but at least we at UCSF weren't using the vast majority of them. And the ones that we were using, we could, we could work around in other ways. So, so that was exciting. And, the site is really, really, plenty fast. And another benefit, incidentally, of removing the DTS code is that the code base is a lot more svelte than it was before it started eating at Subway. The thing is that once we had removed the DTS code, we basically weren't really running MWF anymore. And, this sort of became the sort of great open secret of our installation. And, how do we deal with that? Because we're deeply involved in the collaboration. Now, in an unhealthy or only average collaborative environment, perhaps, this would have basically been the end of the collaboration. We would have gone off and, okay, well, that was fun. That, we were here. MWF got us here. Well, now we want to go over here, and, we're gone. But we stayed involved because it was so much fun, frankly, but also very, very productive to have a lot of people to bounce ideas off of and so on and so forth. And, our issues around performance and the DTS eventually sort of became aligned with UC San Diego's goals of a responsive site, which then those 2 points of view kind of became aligned with a whole bunch of UCLA's plans that Eric's going to talk about in a minute. And, boom, MWF 2.0, it's going to be DTS free, and it's going to be responsive, and it's going to be crazy. And it's probably not going to be called MWF, I hear. But anyway, so So we would never have gotten as far as we've gotten without having MWF as a jumping off point. And we wouldn't have had as many things to experiment with, and we wouldn't have had as many people to bounce ideas off of, and so on and so forth. So basically, through the spirit of collaboration and perhaps a little, neurotic, healthy competition, this enabled us to bite off more than we could chew and then actually proceed to chew it. So I'd give you a segue, but I forgot to write one.
It's always hard to follow that one. But OK, so I think the biggest challenge that we face, and you've heard it already, is that the internet landscape changes very quickly. And in a collaborative environment, how do you keep up with that? We invest all this time, all this energy as one unit, and then all of a sudden, well, now we've got some different views on how things work. And so 2 years ago, when we set out with MWF, we were looking for a framework that would support writing a whole bunch of mobile web apps and make it really easy so that it would degrade the behaviors of the app depending on the capabilities of the device. Today, though, we've got a very different demographic, and this is what's really driving this whole thing. Full-featured phones with full web browsers that are actually using HTML5 technologies better than what's on your desktop, they're everywhere now. And there's also a changing perception of how mobile is used. You sit on your couch now, and when you jump on a website, you want the full access to all the content. You don't just want the little mobile app that is just task-directed. Sometimes it's simply you don't want to go to your computer. And with all of this comes a desire for responsive design. It's already been mentioned in a couple sessions. If you're interested in that, come on up and talk to us afterwards if you'd like. But the short answer is MWF isn't suited for this. It's just not. So one of the approaches was, well, why don't we go hybrid? Why don't we do some sites with MWF and some sites with responsive? And that costs a lot of money, and it spreads out your competency. This is not the right answer. It's the answer that makes sense at this moment in time, and it's given us some good experience, but that's not the end goal of where we're headed. The other option was, well, we could just modify MWF to suit our needs. And small things that make sense, but when you start talking about ripping out the device telemetry stack, and all of a sudden now you're not assembling assets by phone, you're giving everybody the same experience, the overall strategy isn't fitting the new landscape. So I would say neither approach is ideal. And the community, not wanting to see this be the end of the collaboration, though, because we've had such success here, it's time for a new framework. So with MWF, we'd started with one campus. It started at UCLA, and we had to extend it to make it customizable. This was a problem. It added some extra legwork that had to go into it from campus perspectives. Over time, though, it grew a lot from community contributions. I mean, this was very key because no one campus had the resources to devote to pull this off. This time, we're actually starting with that community. And we've got all this past experience already working with frameworks, so be it MWF or other things that different units have worked with. And we also have a growing knowledge in responsive design. We've got a number of campuses now have rolled gateways out that are responsive or have started looking at the question for other sites as well. So then taking all that, we can go almost clean slate in a way. We can start from kind of a new architecture, a new strategy, and we can actually examine our objectives and our approach as we figure out what the next step is. So one of the big things that we're facing with this is with these now these fully capable devices, we don't have to use old standards anymore. With MWF, we were saying, at that point in time, our demographic required us to use a very limited subset of HTML 4.0.1 and CSS 2.1. Today, when we look at our demographic, that's no longer the case. Now we can take advantage of media queries. We can take advantage of CSS3. HTML5 itself, all of our new markup is actually HTML5 directed and polyfilled so that it works in older browsers. Another big change is device agnosticism. With MWF, we were talking about we want to be agnostic across all mobile devices. Now we're saying we want to target all devices, all viewport sizes, but there is that caveat that there's a very small subset of users and decreasing exponentially that we may not be able to cater to directly, and that the degradation will not be per se optimal. With MWF, we had said, well, we're going to be platform independent. But what that meant in MWF was it meant, we still needed to assemble these assets. We still needed to figure out what your device could do, and that was the framework server. And the framework server required PHP. But all the servers using the framework could run in anything, so your app could be written in anything. Our strategy moving forward is we don't need PHP anymore. Now we've got the HTML technologies, such as the media query. So we can actually get rid of the PHP requirement and be truly platform independent. And with that, we no longer, we can support federation. We can have one instance that's supporting many apps, but we can also have many apps all running their own instances, and there's no requisite now on server technologies. So some big wins there in a lot of ways. One thing we did experience that we're looking to continue is the simplicity of markup that was in MWF. People found that really useful. You could literally just say, this is a content area, and it's styled correctly. And you didn't have to worry about anything more granular than this is a content area. So we're looking for a similar level of simplicity here. In any framework we put together, one of the key things we're looking for is giving content publishers the ability to use the elements that they would actually use, like your university masthead. And so this is the type of thing that we're looking to tackle and provide, but do it in such a simple way markup-wise that it's easy to use. Customizability, this is a place where the clean slate is awesome, because when we built MWF, it was for one campus. And then we modified it so that it would work okay for other campuses too. And pretty well, but not as well as it could be done in theory. And so the new architecture looks at this right from the outset. Now, I'm talking a lot about responsive, and some of these there's a ton of cool tools out there, and we're not going to go reinvent all this. In fact, quite to the contrary, we want to take advantage of the good tools that are out there. You've got jQuery and all of its extensions. You use interactivity stuff with these all the time. You've got UI frameworks like Twitter Bootstrap and Foundation. These are awesome for rolling out a whole bunch of things like just buttons and forms and things you don't want to have to style. And there's a whole bunch of other utilities and polyfills. For those that aren't aware, polyfills are what make it possible to, say, use HTML5 in a browser that doesn't support HTML5. So there's a bunch of those types of things, and there's no point in recreating them. So quite to the contrary, what we're looking to do is extend them and focus on integrating the components. And in a way, this time, it's actually a framework of frameworks. It's a toolkit instead. Of course, as we've already heard, there's a bunch of institutions here. Not everybody's got the same perspective. Not everybody is going to be providing the same offering. So we need to figure out how to tackle that problem as well. Some people want to federate, but some people just say, no, we're going to jump into the project as a single unit, and we're just going to use this for our projects directly as is. What tools do we want to support? Do we want to provide an image compression farm, or do we just say, no, cut your images up into 4 sizes and call it a day? And what if you want to use a framework besides the ones that the toolkit uses? If the toolkit is built using Bootstrap, and you're using some other UI framework, how can that work? I mean, how can you, without having to include both frameworks? And the answer to this is on the slide, but it's an architecture of packages and abstractions. So you'll be able to choose which packages to use just by turning things on and off in your configuration. And you'll be able to write adapters that even allow you to do something as deep-setted as, say, I'm not using Bootstrap to generate my UI. I'm using Foundation, or I'm using my custom framework instead. So that's all built into this now, thinking about how we can stay flexible given all the different needs of the campuses. So in terms of what it'll provide, of course, the first 3 are the responsive pieces: flexible grid, media queries, and responsive images. Going a step further, though, we're also talking about UI elements in general. And to accomplish both the flexible grid and the UI elements, we're starting with Bootstrap. But our architecture will allow that to be swapped out. So a campus might be using a different framework, or over time, recognizing how swiftly things change, having learned from MWF in that regard, just, we may be able to swap it out for the hot new framework when Bootstrap, say, goes deprecated in a couple years even. Also included some interactivity libraries. Some of these come out of jQuery, and some of them are things that we've put together for MWF, like a target trigger CSS way of marking things up, so you can actually do interaction without writing any JavaScript at all. And also build tools, mostly because we're talking about static stuff here. So you just configure your build, you run your build, you push it out into your app, and you're done. So key to all of this, though, is figuring out how to build the collaboration in. This has been something with MWF. We've really had to work on our workflow to make this work. And in this case, what we're looking at is kind of similar to MWF. A central IT unit on a campus might fork from the core framework project and then customize it for their needs, applying, like, say, the campus identity. And then they can push that out to other units on their campus, as well as contributing back up the chain to the core. And then other units can, say, take a centrally hosted copy if they don't want to use their own resources to host it, or they could deploy their own instance, modify it as needed, and contribute back up the chain. So building collaboration in is something that has been key because it has allowed us, say, in UCSD's case, to take advantage of the Forms API that they had built. Sorry, I'm moving fast because we had 50 minutes of slides and there's 40 minutes. So, and then beyond the collaboration, we've also, one of the other cool things that's come out of this is we've actually used this opportunity to embark on a whole bunch of other tool developments. The online polling tool is something we're working on. The pilot will probably go out this fall. It's an open source clicker solution, essentially. We're also working on an app sharing environment, so kind of like an app store for web apps, but one that allows campuses to establish rings of trust and publish out apps that say another campus has actually put out, but for their campus users specifically. And we're also looking at some platform as a service stuff. Tom will talk about that in a minute. And then in terms of maintaining the community, we've also really had to push forward on that front. Both we do a bunch of recurring meetings, both for developers and for support. And these are all conference calls because our community is so distributed. And then also occasionally getting some actual face time with conferences, workshops, and other events. And I'm going to make half a minute shameless plug for the MWF conference next month. Topics there will include responsive design and the responsive toolkit we're working on, as well as working with the Mobile Web Framework 1.3, which released recently. And also broader strategies, mobile enablement, an application showcase, and then broader issues like governance, support, and testing. And with that said, I'd like to invite Tom up to close up for us.
Thank you, Eric. Good afternoon. I'd like to take the next 10 minutes of your time to expand on a couple of topics that Eric and others have talked about in more detail, namely community and platforms of service. So one common theme that you've heard throughout the presentation today is community collaboration. That's really at the key of the heart of MWF, with campuses across UC and beyond not only joining but contributing to this initiative. And our goal really is to get the entire higher education community involved, building that larger community across the higher ed and also the broader IT space. So as we grow this community with more institutions, a larger user base, we'll be faced with challenges. Different people with different needs, different perspectives, different levels of commitments. So we need a way for us to efficiently and effectively sustain and grow this initiative, allowing us to really freely share the MWF with the world in a way that's financially viable and meeting our public service mission of the university. So we're looking to partner with CENIC. For those who aren't familiar with CENIC, the CENIC stands for Corporation for Education Network Initiative in California. It's a mouthful. They implement and operate CalRAN, which is basically a high-capacity, high-bandwidth network that most of the California university and colleges use today. We're still working out the details in terms of how this partnership will work. But basically, we're looking to leverage their infrastructure, their industry experience, their corporate networks, to really help us on the business operations. So we're looking to partner with them to launch MWF platform and software as a service. As Eric mentioned earlier, one of the key advantages with MWF is that it's platform dependent. It's compatible with any server-side languages and environment, and it operates centrally and works with any number of distributed mobile web apps. So that makes it a perfect candidate for platform as a service. For those who aren't familiar with the terminology, platform service or software service basically is a way for people to leverage cloud computing. So rather than having to, for you to develop and stand up your own computing platform or software application, you basically subscribe and use the service without having to worry about where it's coming from and how it's being provided to you. So we're looking to launch the MWF platform as a service, not just the platform, but also value-added services to the community in a way that's extensible, scalable, and secure. So in order for us to take it to that next level, we need to be able to continuously improve the product, quickly deploy services, and also at the same time keeping the cost low. So that means the technology behind it must be robust enough to meet these challenges in order for us to really provide these high quality services. So extensibility, really the key here is faster to market. So allowing us to easily and quickly deploy and extend existing services and a different type of capabilities to really meet the dynamic needs of a community. Scalability, so really having designed the system in a way that scales in terms of the software architecture and the underlying infrastructure. Availability, so really 24/7 uptime, targeting a 99.9% uptime. This means that we need redundant cluster servers with failover setup so that we can ensure that there are no interruptions to the service if one of the servers goes down. And also, in the case of a catastrophic event like earthquake or fire, that we can fail over a service to a secondary site with minimal amount of downtime. Security and privacy, these are really important. They go hand in hand. So making sure that the service does not get compromised at any given point in time, and also that there are no unintended sharing of data. And then lastly, performance, really making sure the service has a good response time, at the same time that it'll perform just as well under load. Governance. In order for us to really achieve success here, we need to design and develop this service by the community and for the community. So really catering to the needs of the community in terms of the high level, the overall strategy, the roadmap, and the timeline. And really making sure that we're setting it up with the right level of representation, protecting the community's intellectual property, and also making sure that we're able to handle the common concerns of the community. And having that strong sponsorship, so really having the right level of expertise, experience, and the commitment that it takes to take it to that next level. Charter with clear vision, so really having that really clear vision shared by the community for us to really drive it to success. Community ownership, in my opinion, is really important. Really, we need to make sure that the community owns the initiative. So really, we must collaborate, really share our expertise in various subject matter, and be committed to work with each other. And lastly, the process must be lightweight, agile, so minimizing any kind of bureaucracy, yet effective enough to steer the team in the right direction. So having the right funding model, having the right change management process, development methodology, and so on and so forth. Sustainability. So really, in order to sustain this service for years to come, we need to make sure we have the right service model, cost model, and pricing model. For the service model, we're looking at tier structure, so having tier 1, 2, and 3. So on the first tier, really, is providing services by the individual campus at their location. And the tier 2 would be multi-institutional services, so for more than one institutional campus. And tier 3 would essentially be provided by the service management provided by the technical team. For the cost model, we really need to not only look at development or just the operation maintenance, we need to look at the total cost of ownership. So looking at the cost to do infrastructure, platform, software, support, administration, business development, and so on and so forth. And lastly, pricing model. This is a community-based service, so we need to make sure that the pricing model is fair to the community, and at the same time that we're encouraging participation by the community, and really having some sort of commitment-based pricing model where it's based on the level of contribution, the type of partners, and things like that. I'd like to wrap up by sharing a success story, something that we've done very similar to this in the past to really show you the potential of the initiative here. About 8 years ago, we did UC Berkeley actually did a business continuity software application in 2004. And this was designed and developed specifically just for Berkeley. It cost us hundreds of thousands of dollars to develop it, and about over $100,000 just to maintain the system, just to keep it up and running. As you can see on the chart here, the bottom, this project was called Restarting Berkeley, and the cost was just tremendous. And only one institution benefited from this. Then in 2007, thanks to UCOP's support, we were able to refactor it and deploy it for the rest of the UC campus. And we didn't really have to do much in terms of adding additional features you can see there to meet the needs of the other UC campuses. But that brought our costs down dramatically. And then a couple years ago, we took this and we did it in a whole new platform, re-platformed it, and we partnered with Quality Foundation and made this a worldwide service. Today we have about over 85 institutional subscribers in Australia, Canada, US, and in the very near future, European Union. So as you can see right here, the cost side of things, that pretty much Berkeley is getting this world-class service for next to nothing. So this goes to show the power of community and what we can achieve together if we all work together. And with that, I answer the presentation.
Yeah. Any questions? I know we've only got a couple minutes, but silence. Okay. Yeah.
The first MWF lasted 2 years, right?
Right.
And how long do you think this architecture is going to last?
It's an interesting question. I think because we're approaching it a little bit differently with the adapter-based approach, I actually think this will probably last a lot longer. It's also a much broader approach at this point. I don't know how many more devices there are out there we won't be accounting for, given that we're kind of targeting them all this time around. Yeah, I think this architecture is probably here to stay. Yes? You can actually start using it at any point in time. Yeah, literally. We currently have it. It's a private repo in GitHub right now, so you could actually go check it out, build it into your. We're actually using it in my group. We're actually using the beginnings of it in every project we do, because most of what has been built so far is actually the architecture and the process. So we're using the build process already, even though most of the entities, the things that are a big win for each of the campuses and all the units, because it's like, oh yeah, we have a masthead that's styled. All you got to do is use this masthead entity. The stuff that is already there is stuff like the actual build process, which incorporates, if you're familiar, it incorporates SAS, actually SCSS, but it incorporates that. It also includes Compass, and it packages up stuff like Bootstrap and stuff, but really works with all of that in the SAS layer rather than as compiled CSS. So there's a lot of stuff like that that makes it really flexible. But that's why we're already using it. But as for an actual release with all the entity sets and stuff, I'd like to say targeting end of actual calendar year. So sometime in the beginning of the next year, we'd probably have a production release ready.
Great.
Yes.
So all the functionality that's currently in 1.3, is that going to also be embedded in 2.0, or would there be a reason to have both?
I think, okay, so there's definitely a reason to still have both, and that's for like particular demographics. If you look at your demographic and you go, well, I'm doing a research study and many of my participants do not have smartphones. MWF still makes perfect sense. If you've got apps that are already written in MWF, not necessarily a point in rolling them over to the new framework. This is more moving forward. It's a useful tool, and we probably will come up with some method where your MWF can be made to look like the responsive side, at least for the apps that span both. But you wouldn't have, MWF would never be responsive, but it could be made to transition seamlessly between the two. So you could have apps written in both. San Diego has already done that to an extent. When you look at their responsive site and then you go over to one of their apps, it feels pretty seamless.
But something like geolocation?
Oh, that type of stuff carries over for sure. All that will carry. It's just a matter of the actual MWF semantics. Right. It will vary.
Especially with the specific example of geolocation, the geolocation API in MWF 1.3 mimics exactly the HTML5 geolocation API. So even if MWF were to one day just suddenly stop working, all you would have to do to get it working, to get the geolocation working again, is just remove MWF from all the calls and replace it with Navigator. But I think we tried to do that wherever possible.
The reason it's there though is because we wanted to make sure that for those using like Google Gears and stuff, we didn't want people writing 2 sets of code. Right. So MWF acted as an adapter, figured out which one you needed, and picked the right one.
And the 2 people who use Google Gears thanked me for that. No.
Other questions in the back?
I have 2 questions. One is, I'm only aware of 5 of the campuses that have a mobile app that's authored by one of their in-house IT people, and I was going to see if you knew of any beyond that. And then second question, who decides what content is put on a mobile website or mobile app? Are you working with communications people, or is it kind of end-user feedback?
So for the benefit of both the people in Internet land and me, can you repeat the questions?
Yeah, so I understood the first question to be which campuses have a mobile site of some sort. And the second question, and with the first question we can come back to and we'll just answer that later. But the second question was one about who decides what sort of content goes on your mobile site. We did that in 2 tiers at UCLA, and I know many of the other campuses have done the same thing. Kind of the tier 1 was like if you actually went through the governance process. We have a UCLA Mobile steering committee. And if you went through that process, they picked, in the whole taxonomy where your app would land. And if you're under that process, you get ample notification and ample time to basically throw the brakes on future releases and stuff like that. You know what's happening very, very quickly. And then we have kind of the tier 2s. They're not listed off the main UCLA Mobile site. but yet they still use the MWF, and we're not blocking them in any way. But there's no negative to allowing more people to use the framework. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I was also curious as to whether, are you, when you decide, am I going to put this on the mobile site or not? I don't think it's going to be official mobile site. Is it taking direction from someone, or is it?
It's its own governance board, which includes our communications folk as well as the academics, the administratives.
So that answer is for UCLA. For UCSF, University Relations owns the mobile presence just as they own the main UCSF EDU site and so on and so forth. So initially it was whatever we wanted to put up there because we were just doing it skunkworks style. And then, IT joined in, et cetera, and we all agreed that this really belongs to University Relations.
So for UC San Diego, we piggybacked off of our existing steering committee. So we have a campus web steering committee who is in charge, and there's representatives from across the campus who are in charge of what shows up the taxonomy for ucsd.edu. So we leveraged the same body for the m.ucsd.edu. And so anything that was relevant, they deemed relevant to the entire community or the public, et cetera, got to be on m.ucsd.edu. But everybody was encouraged to use it. If it was very specific to a certain audience or to a certain department, they can publicize that link themselves. They could still use the framework and redirect to the main m.ucsd.edu.
And I'm sorry, your first question involved how many UC campuses had a mobile site. Did I hear that right? Or, yeah. So sort of the canonical directory of mobile EDU sites is Dave Olson's site. He's a guy at University of West Virginia, and I'm looking at it now, and only 5 UC campuses are listed. So if you are at a UC campus that is not Berkeley, Los Angeles, Riverside, San Diego, or San Francisco, and you have a mobile website, you need to do a lot more to make it discoverable.
But I do know there are plans at several other campuses already to roll out the MWF. And those are in the works. Now, just as an aside, we're actually in break time now. So if people want to go get coffee or whatever they do have, go for it. Otherwise, I think we can keep answering questions if anybody else has any. Yeah. Okay. Okay, so one of MWF's key advantages from the beginning was actually the fact that it just provided you a UI toolkit and a set of interactivity libraries. And so except for the core team that was actually working on MWF itself, people on campus just, if they wanted a mobile site, which people did because people were having their students coming to them, their alumni coming to them saying, why isn't this on my phone? That was actually what drove this. And so anybody could just leverage what had already been done and what was already running. They didn't even need infrastructure to do it, really. So that was, from that perspective. And then, from the perspective of why are we all sharing with each other, it's just a matter of, the Forms API, for example, I don't have to make a Forms API. San Diego did that. And so the collaboration has been really useful in that regard as well, in saving all of us time across the board. So. Yes and no. I personally am, but most of the rest of the campus, when somebody just rolls out a site, it's just part of their own funding for their department, and mobile became a priority for them.
So for people in network land, the question is about how the other campuses that aren't UCSF fund and promote their mobile presence. Is that right? Because Orlando, who is from UCSF, knows that more or less I'm the only guy working on it, and I don't get funding to work on it. I do think that there is more funding at the other campuses for this sort of work. I think that at least currently, hopefully that'll change for the better on our campus. I think that it sort of feeds off of itself. I think that there's a certain amount of advocacy. I know that Mojgan's group put together an amazing how to use MWF just using the markup kind of website that can give someone who only knows HTML, everything they need to do to put together a fantastic looking mobile site. I kind of tried to mimic that at UCSF, and I ran out of steam. But you know, those sorts of tools create the sort of, you have to reach a sort of critical mass, and unfortunately we haven't reached that at San Francisco yet.
The other cool thing, I think, is that with like the responsive toolkit that's coming, now it's just when people want to use the campus identity, they lay the campus identity in, and without any effort at all, they just, oh wow, I have a mobile site too. And that's one of the big catalysts for the responsive framework moving forward is, you know, we told people, yeah, you don't have to make an iPhone app, an Android app, a Windows mobile app, you know, et cetera. But you still have to make a mobile app. And now we're getting out of that. We're going into the realm now of you just make one app. You're using your campus identity. I mean, that's what they think of with this toolkit. You know, they'll pull it down from at UCLA. They'll pull it down, hopefully, from our identity site. And yet, at the same time, they'll be getting a full responsive toolkit built in, and so it'll look good on a mobile, a tablet, a desktop, et cetera, without any effort or any thinking about it. So it actually will reduce effort across the board at that point. Other questions? Cool. Well, thank you very much, everyone.
Yeah, thank you.